The great station Ivan Prime floated in the silence of space. Its shining rings turned slowly, catching the light of a distant blue star. Ships of many shapes and colors arrived one after another, gliding toward the docking arms. Each ship carried leaders, envoys, and guards from across the galaxy. They had come for peace talks, summoned by the Galactic Council after years of disputes and unrest. Inside the station, a vast chamber had been prepared. The ceiling arched high, filled with glowing crystals that lit the room in soft silver. Rows of seats circled a wide center floor where speakers would stand. The chamber hummed with quiet voices as delegates took their places. The council had seen many such meetings before. The goal was always the same, to prevent war by words rather than weapons. Some believed this gathering might succeed. Others believed it would fail like the ones before. Still, hope remained, and the air was heavy with expectation. Among the delegates, one group drew little notice at first. They were human envoys, newly arrived in the galaxy's stage of politics. Their ship had been modest compared to the grand vessels of older empires. Their delegation was small, a handful of diplomats, aides, and translators. At the center was a man named Rowan, who wore a plain dark suit. He looked calm, almost too calm, as he walked into the chamber. Other species regarded the humans with little concern. They were new to space and had not yet proven themselves in wars or trade. Some even whispered that Earth had come without guards. Where other delegations entered with soldiers in bright armor or machines armed with heavy weapons, the humans carried only datapads and quiet voices. The council chamber filled with sound as the meeting began. The speaker of the council, a tall being of light and shadow, called for order. The first topic was trade, who could move through which system, and how much each world must pay in tariffs. Voices rose as delegates argued. The ternary, bird-like creatures with wings folded close, spoke sharply about unfair mining claims. The Koran, broad and scaled, slammed a heavy fist against their desk and demanded access to new colonies. The Viuri, slender beings with glowing skin, tried to calm the room but were ignored. All the while, Rowan and his team sat quietly. They listened, took notes, and whispered softly among themselves. Their calm presence stood in contrast to the shouting around them. Some delegates smirked at their silence, believing it was the silence of weakness. The Koran commander, who had arrived in full battle armor, glanced at Rowan with open scorn. He leaned toward another delegate and muttered that the humans were children among giants. The words spread quickly, and more laughter followed. To many in the chamber, humanity seemed too quiet, too gentle, to survive in the harsh galaxy. But Rowan did not react. He kept his eyes on the council floor, watching every word and every gesture. His aides followed his example. They made no show of anger, and no sign of fear. As hours passed, the atmosphere grew heavier. The arguments became sharper, and voices grew louder. The hope of peace felt thin, like a thread ready to break. Yet still, the humans waited, their presence almost invisible in the storm of voices. When the session ended for the day, delegates left in clusters, still arguing as they walked the silver halls. Some returned to their ships to send messages home. Others gathered in private rooms to plan their next moves. The human delegation moved quietly through the crowd, never raising their voices, never showing anger. Rowan's calm expression never changed. To most who saw them, they were forgettable, a group with little influence in the struggles of empires. But a few noticed something different. A young Viuri aide, walking past the humans, caught Rowan's eyes for a brief second. The look was not weak or fearful. It was steady, clear, and strong. It was the kind of look that belonged not to prey, but to someone waiting for the right moment to act. The aide shivered, though he could not explain why. Back in their assigned quarters, the humans gathered in silence. They did not speak of insults or laughter. They reviewed their notes, prepared for the next day, and shared quiet meals. Beyond the walls, fleets of great powers prepared to clash with words, and perhaps more. Humanity remained quiet. Yet their silence was not emptiness. It was patience. And patience, in the galaxy, was often mistaken for weakness. The second day of the council opened with heavy voices and tired faces. The great chamber of Ivan Prime was filled once more, and the glow of the crystal light seemed duller than before. Arguments from the first day had left deep cracks between the delegates. The speaker called for order, but it was hard to find. The ternary repeated their claims over mineral rights, their wings twitching with irritation. The Vuori asked for patience, but their calm words were drowned out. The Koran struck the desk again, their scaled fists leaving dents in the metal surface. Every word carried sharp edges. Rowan entered with his small human delegation and sat quietly as before. His team placed datapads on the table and watched the chamber with steady eyes. Other delegates barely looked at them. In the storm of anger, humanity's silence was like a whisper lost in thunder. Some delegates mocked them openly. A delegate from the Zyran Empire turned toward Rowan and asked if Earth had forgotten its voice. Laughter followed, echoing in the chamber. Rowan simply nodded politely and wrote something on his datapad. His calm face gave nothing away. The Koran commander leaned forward, his scaled body towering over his seat. He spoke loudly enough for all to hear. He declared that humanity's weakness was clear. They brought no guards, no warriors, no visible protection. In his words, humans looked like children playing in a house of fire. His words drew another round of laughter. But not all found it amusing. A few smaller powers watched with quiet interest. They noticed the calm of the human envoy. They noticed how Rowan did not flinch or frown. He let the storm of words pass over him like water over stone. As the talks moved on, tensions sharpened. The great powers fought not only with words but with threats. The Zyran warned that trade routes would be cut if demands were not met. The Ternary threatened to withdraw their fleets from the border patrols. And then came the Koran, who spoke with open menace. Their commander announced that if his empire did not receive control of new colonies, they would seize them by force. He declared that peace was only for the weak. He turned his eyes toward Rowan and added a cruel remark: humanity should stay silent and stay small, or it would be swept aside like dust. The chamber fell into uneasy silence for a brief moment. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke against the Koran. Their fleets were powerful, their warriors feared. Few dared challenge them directly. All eyes turned to Rowan, waiting for his reply. But Rowan gave none. He only raised his eyes, met the gaze of the Koran commander, and then slowly returned to his notes. His silence seemed to puzzle some, frustrate others, and amuse the boldest. Whispers spread again. Some said humanity had no answer because it had no strength. Some said Earth was wise to avoid a fight it could not win. And a few, very few, wondered what lay behind Rowan's stillness. As the session dragged on, the council chamber felt heavier. Delegates snapped at each other with sharp words. Promises of cooperation broke apart, replaced by warnings and hidden threats. Each speech seemed less about peace and more about preparing for war. Through it all, the human delegation remained quiet observers. Their hands moved across data pads, recording every word. Their faces stayed calm, almost unreadable. Their silence became a mirror, reflecting the fury of the others while showing none of their own. When the meeting finally paused, delegates spilled into the wide halls of the station. Clusters of beings argued in private corners. Holograms of fleets and star maps lit the walls as empires whispered of strategies. The Koran commander walked past the humans with a sneer. His heavy boots struck the floor like thunder. He made no effort to hide his contempt. Rowan and his team stepped aside politely, offering no challenge. But again, someone noticed. A ternary aide, young and sharp-eyed, paused as he watched Rowan's calm stride. There was no fear in the human's steps. No nervous glance, no hurried pace. Instead, there was patience, like a hunter waiting in silence. The aide said nothing, but the thought stayed with him. Back in their quarters, the humans spoke softly. Rowan reviewed notes with his aides, marking certain phrases with care. He gave quiet instructions, and his team nodded with discipline. No anger filled the room. No frustration broke their voices. They acted as if every insult and every threat had been expected. Outside, the station carried the weight of many voices, each preparing for the collapse of talks. Fleets stood ready in distant space, their captains waiting for orders. Old rivalries sharpened like blades. And through it all, humanity remained quiet. But silence is not always weakness. Sometimes silence is strength waiting for the right moment to speak. The third day of the council began with louder voices than before. The speaker tried to bring order, but the chamber was restless. Delegates were tired of polite words. Every speech carried hidden anger, and every pause felt like a warning of what was to come. The great empires circled each other with sharp tongues. The ternary accused the Zyran of blocking trade lanes. The Viuri called for patience again, but no one listened. The Koran commander struck his desk with such force that cracks spread through the metal surface. The echo of the blow filled the chamber, and silence followed for only a moment. The commander stood tall, his scaled body gleaming in the silver light. His voice was deep and heavy, carrying across the chamber without need of translation. He declared that the talks were a waste of time. His empire would no longer wait for weak words. If the council refused to grant his demands, the Koran fleets would take what they needed by force. The words cut through the air like a blade. Many delegates shifted uneasily in their seats. Some lowered their eyes, unwilling to meet his gaze. The Koran were feared for good reason. Their fleets had crushed rebellions. Their warriors were known across the stars for brutal efficiency. No one doubted that the threat was real. The commander turned his gaze toward Rowan. His eyes narrowed, and his voice grew sharper. He mocked the human envoy, saying Earth should stay far from the path of war. He described humanity as a fragile race with no claws, no armor, no fleets worthy of respect. He warned that if humans tried to stand in the way, they would be swept aside like dust in a storm. The chamber fell quiet once more. All eyes turned to Rowan, waiting for his reply. Some expected him to beg for mercy. Some expected him to speak of peace in desperate tones. Others expected him to remain silent as before. Rowan lifted his eyes slowly and looked at the Koran commander. His expression did not change. He gave no sign of anger, no sign of fear. After a moment, he simply turned back to his notes and began writing. The silence stretched. A few delegates exchanged puzzled glances. The Koran commander laughed, a deep sound that rolled across the chamber. To him, Rowan's silence was proof of weakness. To others, it was proof of caution. To a very small number, it was something else entirely, an unanswered question that lingered like a shadow. The speaker attempted to move the session forward, but the mood had shifted. The Koran had made their threat plain, and no one dared challenge them. Every word spoken afterward felt thin, like paper in a storm. The Ternary muttered among themselves, calculating how much ground they might lose if war came. The Zirans spoke boldly, claiming their fleets would not be intimidated, but their voices shook beneath the surface. The Viuri once more called for calm, their glowing skin dim with worry. Through it all, the humans sat still. Rowan's hand moved across his datapad, recording every detail. His aides mirrored his calm, their faces steady, their eyes sharp. They gave no reaction to insults, no reply to threats. It was as if they were waiting for something no one else could see. When the session ended, the delegates left in heavy silence. The halls of Ivan Prime buzzed with whispers. Some spoke of preparing fleets. Others whispered of alliances and betrayals. Few spared more than a passing glance at the humans as they walked quietly through the crowd. But not everyone dismissed them. A young delegate from the minor world of Siren watched Rowan carefully. She had seen fear in the eyes of others when the Koran spoke. She had seen anger in the Zyran and desperation in the Ternary. Yet she had seen none of these in Rowan. His eyes held something steady, something hidden, like deep water that did not show its full depth on the surface. In private chambers, the humans met again. Rowan reviewed the words of the Koran carefully. He marked the exact phrases, the exact tone, the exact moment the threat was given. His aides listened closely. No one raised their voice. No one spoke of fear. Their meeting was calm, like soldiers discussing a plan already set in motion. Outside their quarters, the station stirred with quiet alarm. Fleets across the galaxy were being placed on alert. War was no longer a distant shadow. It was a shape forming on the horizon. The Koran had made the first open threat, and others would follow. The galaxy believed humanity had no part to play. They were newcomers, too young and too small to matter in the games of empires. Yet, as Rowan's calm gaze lingered on the star maps displayed in his chamber, one truth began to take shape. Humanity had come to the talks in silence. But silence was not the same as weakness. Silence was a choice. And choices had meaning. The fourth day of the council opened with heavy tension. The delegates filed into the chamber in silence, and even the glowing crystals above seemed dimmer, as if the light itself knew the weight of the moment. Every empire had arrived with suspicion in their eyes. Every word spoken felt sharp, every glance heavy. The speaker called for order, but voices rose before the call was finished. The Ternary began at once, accusing the Zyran of secret raids near their border. The Zyran denied it and shouted back that the Ternary were spreading lies to cover their own movements. The Viuri tried to speak, but their words were buried under the noise. Rowan and the humans sat at their table, calm as ever. Their notes glowed softly on their data pads, their eyes moved from one speaker to another, but they said nothing. Their stillness made them invisible to most, like shadows at the edge of the storm. The Koran commander took his turn again, louder than all the rest. His voice rolled across the chamber like thunder. He announced that the Koran fleets were already prepared. If demands were not met today, then tomorrow war would begin. He pointed at the star map displayed above the chamber, naming systems that would soon fall under Koran control. His words were not promises. They were declarations. A wave of unease passed through the delegates. Some began to speak quickly to allies at their sides. Others sat in frozen silence, unwilling to meet the commander's eyes. The threat was no longer hidden. It was clear, plain, and final. Rowan did not move. His face remained calm. His team continued writing. The Corran commander noticed the silence and smirked. He raised his voice and declared before all that Earth would be one of the first to suffer. He described the destruction of human colonies with cruel detail, as if he had already planned the strike. The chamber froze. Even those who had mocked humanity earlier felt a ripple of discomfort. Earth was new, untested, and seen as weak. To target them so openly felt unnecessary, but no one spoke against it. No empire wanted to risk the wrath of the Corran. Still, Rowan did not rise to answer. He only looked up for a brief moment, meeting the commander's eyes with steady calm, then returned to his notes. His silence unsettled a few who watched closely, but to most it was proof that humanity had nothing to offer. The session fell apart quickly after that. Voices clashed without pause. Delegates shouted over one another, accusing, threatening, demanding. The speaker called for order again and again, but the words carried no weight. The great chamber, once built for unity, now echoed with the sound of division. By the end of the day, the talks collapsed completely. Delegates stood from their seats, their faces hard, their voices filled with final warnings. The ternary walked out in clusters, whispering of defenses along their borders. The Zyran stormed from the chamber with fire in their eyes. Even the calm Viari left in silence, their glow dimmed by sorrow. The Corran commander lingered for a moment. He looked toward Rowan and his delegation and gave a cruel smile. His words carried across the chamber, Earth would not survive what was coming. Then he turned and walked away, his armored steps loud in the emptying hall. Rowan stood with his team. He gathered his notes, bowed politely toward the speaker, and left the chamber without a single word. His calm steps contrasted with the storm of anger rushing through the halls. Where others walked quickly, Rowan walked steadily, as if time itself was on his side. In the wide corridors of Ivan Prime, chaos spread. Delegates crowded around holograms, sending orders to their fleets. Messages raced across the stars. War was no longer a distant threat. It was only a breath away. Some noticed the humans as they passed, still walking calmly toward their quarters. To most, they looked powerless, like quiet guests in a house of fire. Yet one observer, a minor aide from a neutral world, paused to watch them. He saw no fear in their faces, no despair in their eyes. He saw patience, as if they were waiting for the right moment to reveal something hidden. The thought lingered with him long after they disappeared from view. Inside their private chamber, Rowan placed his notes on the table. His aides sat around him, listening as he gave quiet instructions. There were no raised voices, no panic, no rushing. Their work was careful, deliberate, like builders preparing the foundation of a tower long before its walls were seen. Outside, fleets across the galaxy moved into position. Warships gathered at borders, and soldiers stood ready for orders. The empires believed the talks had failed because weakness had won over wisdom. They believed humanity would be the first to fall. But the humans knew something the others did not. Their silence was not surrender. It was a waiting game, and the galaxy had no idea what waited behind it. The council chamber stood empty after the collapse of talks, but the station outside was alive with noise. Ivan Prime's long halls echoed with hurried steps, and the docking bays were filled with ships preparing to leave. Fleets across the galaxy were already moving. Every delegate had sent word home that war was certain. Among the rush, the humans remained calm. Rowan and his team walked through the busy corridors without raising their voices or quickening their pace. Other delegates pushed past them, speaking urgently into translators, their eyes filled with fear or anger. The humans looked out of place, like travelers walking slowly while storms raged around them. When they reached their quarters, Rowan gave simple orders to his aides. A coded message was sent through a secure channel, hidden inside what looked like a routine diplomatic report. The message was short, but it carried great weight. Once it was sent, Rowan closed the console and sat back, his expression as calm as ever. Hours passed. The station's wide windows showed fleets arriving and departing, engines flashing like streaks of light against the black of space. Everyone expected the next day to bring war. The smaller empires worried about survival. The great powers sharpened their plans of conquest. And almost no one thought of the humans, except as a weak target. Then the alarms began. The first sound was a low chime, followed by a steady rising tone. Lights across the station turned red. Security forces rushed through the halls, and holographic maps filled the air with symbols of approaching fleets. Delegates ran to the nearest windows, their eyes wide as ships emerged from the edge of the system. At first, many thought the Koran had moved early. Their fleets were feared, and their commander had already promised war. But the ships that appeared were not Koran. Their designs were unfamiliar, their shapes sleek and sharp, their movements precise. They did not belong to any known empire. The chamber soon filled again, not for talks but for emergency reports. Delegates shouted for answers, each demanding to know whose ships had arrived. Rowan entered quietly with his team and took his place. He did not speak, only waited. The reports came in waves. Dozens of fleets were appearing at the edge of the system. Their hulls carried markings in a simple design, the blue and white crest of Earth. Their weapons arrays unfolded like wings of steel, glowing faintly in the light of the distant star. Each fleet moved in disciplined formation, not threatening the station but surrounding it with calm precision. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates cried out in disbelief. Some claimed it was impossible, for Earth was too young to build such fleets. Others demanded proof. Scanners confirmed the truth, the ships were human, and they were many. The Koran commander stood in shock, his voice louder than the rest. He accused the humans of deception, of hiding strength while pretending to be weak. His words carried anger, but there was also unease in his tone. He had believed Earth to be an easy target. Now, the sight outside the station showed otherwise. Rowan rose at last. His calm voice carried across the chamber. He explained that humanity had not come unprepared. Earth had listened quietly because it believed in peace, but peace did not mean helplessness. While others laughed at their silence, humanity had built fleets in the shadows of distant systems, hidden until the moment they were needed. He spoke without anger, without threat. His words were steady, like the ships that now filled the space outside. Humanity had come with open hands, but also with guarded strength. They did not seek war, yet they would not allow themselves to be crushed or ignored. Some delegates were furious. They shouted that humanity had lied to the council. Others were fearful, asking what other secrets Earth might hold. But a few, especially those from smaller powers, felt relief. They saw in humanity a balance, a new player that might hold the stronger empires in check. The Koran commander slammed his fist against the desk, demanding to know if the human fleets were ready for battle. Rowan did not smile, but his voice carried quiet power. The fleets, he said, were not here to strike. They were here to stand. Any who sought to destroy Earth would find resistance. Any who sought to bully the weak would face challenge. The chamber fell into uneasy silence. Outside the windows, the human fleets held their formation, their engines glowing faintly, their weapons powered but calm. They made no aggressive move, yet their presence filled the station with a weight heavier than any threat spoken before. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as newcomers, not as children, but as a force waiting to be measured. The talks had failed, but something new had begun. The galaxy woke that day to a revelation. The human fleets had revealed themselves, and the consequences rippled across star systems like shock waves. No empire had anticipated such strength from the newcomers. Stories spread quickly through messages, broadcasts, and whispers in the corridors of power. Every corner of known space trembled with the knowledge that Earth was not as weak as it seemed. At Ivan Prime, delegates gathered again, but the chamber was different now. Where there had been anger and arrogance before, now there was uncertainty. The Corran commander paced his platform, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. He had expected to intimidate humans with words, perhaps take a few systems as a warning. He had never imagined they would arrive armed and ready. Other empires reacted in varied ways. The Ternary spoke urgently of rechecking all borders. Their fleets were recalled from distant systems to guard their colonies. The Zyran demanded emergency conferences to discuss alliances. Smaller species who had feared the great powers now whispered among themselves. Some were secretly relieved. If humans could stand against the strongest empires, maybe there was hope for balance in the galaxy. Rowan entered the chamber with quiet confidence. His team followed. They had observed the reactions from the windows, reading every expression, every gesture. The humans had chosen not to make aggressive moves, yet the presence of their fleets spoke louder than words. It was proof of preparation, discipline, and strength. The Corran commander raised his voice, demanding answers. Who allowed Earth to hide such fleets? Why had they not been monitored? He accused the humans of deception, but fear crept into his tone despite his bravado. The Council's records had shown nothing. Earth had arrived quietly, spoken politely, and yet now it wielded power that rivaled entire empires. Rowan stepped forward, his calm voice filling the chamber. He explained that humanity had never sought to hide for conquest. They had prepared in peace, believing it would never be needed. Yet the galaxy had shown a readiness for war at the smallest threat, so humanity chose to be prepared. Their fleets were not tools of aggression, but shields of protection. Any attack on humans, or on those they chose to defend, would meet immediate and decisive resistance. Gasps echoed across the chamber. Some delegates whispered of treachery. Others, quietly, began calculations of alliances and defense strategies. The shock was not only in the number of fleets but in their sophistication. Weapons and shields were unlike any known designs, yet their formation and tactics suggested disciplined training over decades. Humanity had grown faster, and stronger, than anyone realized. The Corran commander's pride clashed with his fear. He realized his empire had overestimated weakness and underestimated patience. To him, the human calm was almost mocking. Every word from Rowan carried quiet authority, and the fleets outside confirmed what the eyes in the chamber could see: Earth was not defenseless. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the ripple effects continued. Merchants halted trade with the assumption of war. Governors issued new orders to fleet commanders. Spies and scouts rushed to gather intelligence on Earth systems. No one could guess the true size of humanity's hidden power. The perception alone had shifted the balance of thought. Even among allies of the great empires, fear began to replace confidence. The humans had revealed a principle that no one had fully understood before: preparation, patience, and discipline could outweigh years of old power. Those who had thought Earth insignificant now hesitated to make decisions. Some quietly reconsidered old alliances, wondering if their supposed strength was enough. Rowan observed silently. He made no threats, no demands. Yet in the stillness of his presence, the chamber understood something crucial: humans had patience and strength, and they would not be rushed or cornered. The galaxy could choose aggression, but it would meet consequences far greater than words. By the end of the day, the council chamber was quiet. Delegates left with new caution in their steps. Conversations had shifted from war plans to diplomacy, from threat to calculation. The galaxy had learned a new truth: humans might appear small, polite, or unarmed, but they carried strength behind their calm. Any who ignored it would find themselves unprepared. In the quiet of their quarters, Rowan and his aides discussed the reactions. There was no celebration, no gloating. They had simply revealed what had been necessary. Humanity had come to the council for peace, and now the galaxy knew that peace would be taken seriously, not assumed. Outside, human fleets held their positions, engines humming softly, weapons ready but idle. They did not move forward aggressively, yet the presence was enough. Any empire thinking of striking first had to think again. Humanity had arrived in silence, and the shockwave of their presence would be remembered for generations. The council had failed to make peace, but the galaxy had learned a new rule. Humans were no longer the newcomers to be dismissed. They were players to be considered, respected, and, if necessary, feared. And Rowan knew that patience, discipline, and preparation had done what threats and anger never could: they had made the galaxy listen. The final day of the council arrived, but it felt different. The chamber was quiet, filled with delegates who no longer spoke first, who measured every word before they spoke. The galaxy had already changed. The revelation of humanity's fleets had shifted the balance, and everyone present knew it. Rowan entered with his delegation, moving steadily through the hall. His calm presence drew attention, but no one dared interrupt him. His team followed closely, their faces composed, their eyes alert. They did not carry weapons openly, yet the aura around them was one of authority and readiness. The speaker called the meeting to order, but the tone was cautious. No empire shouted, no empire demanded. Even the Corran commander, once loud and scornful, spoke with a careful restraint. He had realized that words alone could not challenge humans, and pride made him temper his tone. Rowan rose to address the chamber. His voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of truth. He spoke first of peace, of the desire of humanity to exist without conflict. He acknowledged the fears and rivalries of other empires and the long histories of competition. Yet he made it clear that Earth would no longer be dismissed. Humanity had come quietly to talk, but they would not be pushed aside. He spoke of strength and patience, of preparation without aggression. The fleets outside the station were ready to defend, not conquer. The humans had hidden their power for decades, not for domination, but to ensure survival if the galaxy failed to act with fairness. Every empire listening understood that aggression would meet immediate resistance. Some delegates whispered among themselves. The Ternary nodded to one another, reassessing old strategies. The Zyran lowered their heads, realizing the human presence required new calculations. Even the Corran commander's pride shifted, replaced by careful consideration. The galaxy had underestimated Earth. Rowan did not demand alliances or obedience. He offered respect and fairness, and in return, he asked for recognition, that humans would be treated with honesty and that peace, when sought, would be honored. His words carried clarity and authority, not anger. The chamber fell silent after he finished. The weight of the fleets outside and the calm resolve within the humans had spoken more powerfully than threats ever could. Delegates looked at one another, realizing that negotiations could no longer ignore the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was ready. Small voices began to speak cautiously. Some minor empires asked questions about the fleets, about technology, about intentions. Rowan answered each question with patience and clarity. There was no deception, no exaggeration. The answers reassured some, startled others, and gave the galaxy a chance to breathe for the first time in days. The Corran commander spoke at last. His tone was sharp but measured. He acknowledged that humanity's presence could no longer be dismissed. He warned that old rivalries would not disappear, but he promised caution. Even he had learned the lesson of patience, seeing that aggression would no longer be simple or cost-free. By the end of the day, the council did not declare a final peace. That was not possible after years of conflict. But something far more important had happened. Respect had been established. The galaxy now understood that humans had strength, intelligence, and patience. The power to destroy or protect rested in their hands, and it could not be ignored. Rowan and his team returned to their quarters quietly. There were no celebrations, no cheering. They had acted as they always did, with calm purpose. They had come to talk, and now the galaxy had no choice but to consider them seriously. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through violence, but through preparation and measured action. Outside, the fleets remained in formation, engines glowing softly, weapons at the ready but idle. They were a reminder of what humans could do, a silent statement that peace must be respected. The galaxy would think twice before testing Earth or underestimating its people again. In the quiet of the station, Rowan looked out at the distant stars. He knew that the true work was only beginning. Humanity had shown its strength, but it must also guide itself wisely. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns and challenges, and every empire now viewed humans as equals. For the first time, the Council realized that Earth had not come unarmed in spirit or in strategy. Humanity had come with patience, with discipline, and with the calm resolve of those who understood both risk and responsibility. They had not sought glory, but they had demanded recognition. And the galaxy, for all its fear and pride, had finally understood, humans were not just another species. They were a force to be respected, a presence that would shape the future of space itself. Rowan turned from the window and nodded to his team. The council chamber may have failed to produce peace, but humanity had achieved something far greater. The galaxy would never forget that silence and patience can carry a power greater than any weapon, and that humanity had arrived fully prepared, ready for whatever came next. The stars outside shone calmly, reflecting a future now full of cautious hope.